Rachel V. Hill, taking a daily look at the biggest stories in Denver sports and interacting live with you, the Coffee Break fam. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of joe, and enjoy your coffee break. Here's your host, Rachel V. Hill.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. It's hump day. It means you're halfway through the week. It means you're just a day away from some NFL action in week 6. And specifically today, it means the Avs regular season is back. And there's no one that I would rather have with me to talk about this than, it's not Michel Goulet, but he does have a nice mustache, and that is Jake Shapiro. Jake, how you doing, man?
Good. This is one of my favorite times of the year, and I feel like I'm a great person to talk to about this. Me and Richie were just before the show talking about like the WNBA, college basketball. We were talking about baseball. We were talking about everything in sports. The sports equinox is just a few days away when all 4 major leagues are in action on the same day. Only happens like once or twice a year. And this is the best time of year as a sports fan, at least in my mind, because we just got everything going on.
I just got to chill a little bit. We were just talking about how many storylines there are in postseason baseball, and the WNBA finals are starting, and you've got the Broncos riding a 3-game win streak and, making moves that they didn't think they would make. The Nuggets are just a few weeks away from the regular season, and the Avs start today, 8:00, Golden Knights. What's your vibe on the Avs from a broader perspective as they get ready to kick their season off?
I've got this interesting question I'm going to ask you later about the Avs, so remind me to ask you this. But I think just the general vibe on this Avs season is one of like, well, if it all clicks, maybe things can go our way. If guys are healthy, if Gabe comes back towards the start of the postseason, then they've got a chance. But otherwise, it's kind of just going to be like, all right, we're seeing Nathan McKinnon be great. The team's going to make the playoffs, but there's really no hope. That's kind of my vibe.
Yeah, it really does feel like in a lot of ways that, on paper and just with the eye test as the season progresses, that there's top tier NHL talent on this team, even without, some of the players that they're missing. But the players that they're missing, as the season winds down and when you get to the postseason, you realize there's no gas left in the tank. There's just not enough firepower, and then you balance in whether you have consistency at the goalie position, which the Avs have been struggling with for years. It just does feel like you're right. Like they got to catch a handful of green lights for it to go. And that's why I struggle a little bit with this Avs team specifically, not with hockey and basketball in general, with the the regular season doesn't matter. Just get to the dance and get to the postseason and then they'll turn it on. And we have faith in these guys. I hear Mike Evans say it all the time, and he's certainly not alone. But the margin for error when you need a lot of green lights, you can't hit that many yellows. So the margin for error is not as big as I think that some people might believe that it is. For example, let's just run through it. The Avs have 3 major players that are out to start the season. You got Gabe Landeskog, who hasn't played hockey in 2 years. Can the Avs win a cup without Gabe Landeskog?
No.
Really?
Straight up, no.
Okay.
I mean,
I didn't think you were going to say that either.
He's the guy who, to me, separates them from being a really good team to an elite team. And there's the other guys, too, that really matter, and we'll get into them. But the way Landeskog plays is so important, particularly in postseason hockey, because he can play any style, Richie. He's a skilled forward who can go in the pretty ways, but he also gets in front of the net and does a lot of the dirty things that are required of these really grueling teams. You saw how the Florida Panthers won a cup last year. They got rid of their little superstar pretty boy and Jonathan Huberdeau, and they got tougher with Tkachuk, and they scored a lot of gritty, dirty goals. And to me, Gabe Landeskog is that guy for the Colorado Avalanche. And look at what he did on that postseason run 2 years ago. He scored a point a game. He gave up his knee to win a Stanley Cup.
Yeah,
and that's the kind of effort you really need to win a cup. So to me, Gabe is what they need, and I just don't know that Gabe can even be 80% of what Gabe was after 2 years off, and that's what scares me.
That's what I was going to ask you. First of all, you're unequivocal right. There's no doubt he sacrificed his body and potentially his future and his career to win that cup.
Like, build a statue of Gabe now.
Yeah,
to me,
I'm with you 100% because there's no way. I mean, we were down there at the parade when we were covering it all, and we were up close, and you just couldn't tell in that moment all of the dominoes that were going to fall after that. It just felt like we're about to go back to back. We might be the Tampa Bay Lightning and go for a three-peat, you know?
Well, because of the two guys, because of McKinnon and Kale are still so young that you're thinking, okay, we're going to have a couple years here where both of those guys are in their MVP or Calder windows. And truly, they still are. I mean, McKinnon's coming off an MVP thing or MVP win. He's got his MVP celebration tomorrow night after there's like an event going on. And then Kale McCarr is one of the best defenders in the NHL still. He's still a baby, basically. He's going to be around for forever. So it's like, if you can get enough support and depth around those two guys, you have a chance. The problem is, and you'll mention the other guys that are injured that aren't playing. To me, it's the depth that separates you come playoff time. And that's why teams win. That's why the Florida Panthers won last year. That's why the Tampa Bay Lightning were so successful for so many years. Same with the Chicago Blackhawks. It is those third and fourth line guys and getting all-star contributions from your non-all-stars. Guys like Valeri Nichushkin putting up point-per-night performances in the postseason. And, I'd still make the case that Val was actually the best player in that Stanley Cup final series. The Avs were a completely different team with him and on and off the ice the last couple of years in the postseason. So, to me, it's a lot of different factors that have combined, Richie, where it's like, the margin of error is not only smaller, but I have so many questions about a team going into the year. I evaluate teams based on the margin of error and how many questions I have about them going into a year. And right now, where I was on the Avs 3 years ago versus where I am now is a lot different of a headspace. Yeah. Well, and you mentioned it. You said unequivocally no, that the Avs can't win a cup without Gabe Landeskog. And you gave all the valid reasons. You didn't even mention what a lot of us felt like was missing in the first year without Gabe right after the cup, which is he's the captain. And there is a team that needs leadership in a locker room. And you have, and you can say whether whether it's effective or whether it's not, but maybe Val Nichushkin doesn't go off the rails as much if there's somebody like Gabe in the locker room to kind of help steady things. Cause it's not going to be McKinnon. He's the best player on the team. And he's, wired that way. He's kind of like Vaughn, where Vaughn was clearly the best player on a lot of Broncos teams, but he was not a captain kind of thing. Anything he led sometimes ended up with a vacuum cleaner. Exactly. Exactly. I may or may not have gotten a Halloween costume idea from that exact exchange. But we we mentioned Val, who's still serving his out through next month. And then Arturi Lekkonen's out. I think Lekkonen might be the sneaky one because he doesn't have the same kind of name gravitas like here locally that Gabe and Val do. But I think his contributions can't be understated. There's a reason why the Avs were so successful once they picked up Lekkonen, and that's that depth scoring I'm talking about. Getting Mikko Rantanen to do what Mikko Rantanen does, awesome. Getting Kale to do what Kale does, awesome. Getting Nate to do what Nate does, awesome. But you need more than three players. And to me, having guys like Valeri Nichushkin and Arturi Lekkonen step up, I mean, Devin Tays is again one of their star players, but then you have a guy like Josh Manson play the way he did in that cup run, or Sammy G the way he played. Like that to me is what separates them. And right now, the Avs are without a lot of that talent, even let alone hoping those guys can perform to their best selves. It was a masterclass from Sakic and McFarland in terms of the moves they made at the deadline the year that they made the cup run, because you can go back and look at it. Every player that they acquired that year in the offseason and especially at the deadline had a postseason goal or a significant postseason moment along that run to the cup. It wasn't just led by your front runners. So to your point about depth contributions and scorings, I think there's a lot of question marks still that have to be answered. We're going to get to see things from some young guys like Cal Richie and eventually Kovalenko. Give me Ivan, baby. Come on. I was waiting for you to say, because I was like, is it Ivan? Is it Ivan Ivan? Like, does he separate the pronunciations of it? But yes, that is going to be so nice. They named him twice. I want as many Ivan highlights now as I can, just so that we keep that in the rotation. Yeah, man. And you didn't even mention this too, which is, do Avs fans even trust Georgie at this point? That was where And to get through the regular season, you also need two goalies. So if you don't even trust Georgie as your number one goalie, and last year we kind of cycled through the backups, what's going to even happen on the backside behind Georgie? So I'm a little concerned with the Avs goaltending situation again going into this year. I'm concerned with their scoring. But the one thing I will say going into this year is, again, their top four defensemen look awesome. I just don't know that they can carry them an entire year again. And the wheels fell off the bandwagon a little bit towards the end last year for a reason, because it was a lot of minutes every single night for that top four.
Yeah, the fact that the Avs were able to win a Stanley Cup with Kemper and Frankie in combination, who statistically were two of the more poor goalies in hockey in the categories that matter.
That's the exception, not the rule.
I was going to say, it is an anomaly, and you can't count on it. And Georgie, has had moments where it's been like, oh, maybe this can be the guy. Maybe they did find the guy who was sitting behind Shesterkin, but was just like a waiting in the weeds. But for the majority of his, I've kind of likened the Georgiev experience to like the Mind Eraser, which is just because my childhood memories of being on the Mind Eraser are whiplash and potential brain damage. It's just felt like you never know. Like for example, they're playing Vegas tonight, right? In his last 3 starts against Vegas, he's 1-1-1. He got shelled in one game for 7 or 8 goals. And they lost. He gave up 4 goals in an overtime loss, and he shut him out at home for their win. It's like you can go anywhere on the spectrum with this guy, and you really just don't know where it's going to land.
You mentioned the backup thing, too. It's like, well, is he Steve Young sitting behind Joe Montana?
Right.
Or is he Matt Castle sitting behind Matt Leinart? And to me, he's Matt Castle.
Yeah.
And Matt Castle had a lot of great games, Richie.
He did.
He also had a lot of bad ones.
He did. He got paid on a couple of, literally got paid on a handful of very good games.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. I'm with you. I think that they're the confidence that we had in the years where they just kept hitting the second round wall before breaking through to the cup, where it was just like, this team is clearly the best team in hockey when even 80% of their guys are firing on all cylinders. They're just clearly the best, and no one can keep up with that kind of swarming offensive production. And that has just waned in the last handful of years. And it really does feel like they need some help and they need some breaks. So we'll see how it pans out. They get going tonight. And then, I think we're going to be on pins and needles all season long. Like, are we going to have another pregame drug test pop from Valeri Nichushkin?
On the way that happened pregame too. But let me ask you this, as you're a big Avs and Nuggets fan. I know. Are you on more pins and needles and saying, let's kind of see with the regular season, but it kind of doesn't matter, with the Nuggets or the Avs? Because I think both these teams have a very similar perspective entering this season, but I can't tell which fan base is more kind of just hoping on hope.
I think I'm on more pins and needles when it comes to that stuff in the regular season with the Avs, because I think you have in the NBA, you got less people on the court. Individual players can have a greater impact. And I think that Nikola Jokic can shoulder a bigger burden for the Nuggets during the regular season. And hopefully Jamal, with the big extension and all that, can do a little bit more individually for their team than Makar and McKinnon can do on the ice, where hockey is just, it's so much of it seems to be random chance and unpredictable. And, one wrong bounce can take you the wrong way.
Right.
And, so I think I'm a little bit more, nervous about the regular season kind of trajectory for the Avs than I am the Nuggets. But speaking of the Nuggets, they are back from Abu Dhabi. They lost both games to the Celtics, but I think that's kind of a tale of the box score kind of thing. The starters outplayed the Celtics, at least in the first game. And we got to look at Russell Westbrook, and we got to look at kind of the new look Nuggets post KCP, who is happy to be on a team that plays defense now.
There was a quote where from KCP, he's like, this is the first time in my career I've been on a team where everyone plays defense. And Nuggets fans were like, well, what the heck does this mean? Well, in year 1, he had Bones Highland on his team.
True.
In year 2, he had Jalen Pickett on his team.
Yep.
So he's right.
Yeah. And this will be the year where we find out how much we're going to miss him. So
a lot.
I think so too. You were all over media day, and you've been as tied into the Nuggets as anybody this offseason. Same question as before. What's your vibe on the Nuggets as they're about midway or so through the preseason, getting ready to go for this season?
Yeah, it's funny because, we're going to do Nuggets podcast here throughout the season, and I'm going to be a part of that. But I feel like I'm going to say on almost every Nuggets podcast, none of this matters till April, which is so disappointing to have a regular season where it's like, well, the Nuggets are literally coming off one of their greatest seasons in franchise history. They set the franchise win mark. They won a playoff series. It was a great season. They just didn't follow up their title with another title defense, pretty much.
It felt like the way it ended too was just
right.
brutal.
You can't blow a 20-point lead in a game 7 at home. You just can't. So yeah, poor ending. And what we learned is that they stretched themselves out a little thin during the regular season. So this season is literally all about just making the playoffs, making sure you're not a play-in team. So a 6
seeding be damned, as long as you're in the top 8.
Top six, because you don't want to be in the play-in. You don't want to have to deal with that. So if you're 5, 6, or 4, I think that's fine.
Okay.
And to me, people are going to panic a little bit about that and read into it a little bit too much. But what I learned last year is if the Nuggets can go in healthy, they're fine. In their last last 2 postseasons, they won their final 6 postseason games on the road in the year they won the title, right? They beat the Suns, the Lakers, and then the Heat. All 6 games on the road. Last year, they went 3-2 in the postseason on the road. They can win playoff games on the road. That's a thing they've proven. The thing they've also proven is that they need to be healthy and rested going into the postseason. So this year, to me, it's not about Nikola Jokic winning an MVP. It's all about getting Jamal Murray healthy, playing well, making sure the bench is competent, and making sure you find a competent backcourt mate for Jamal Murray, whether that's Christian Brown or Julian Strother, and making sure maybe you add one more guy at the deadline that kind of fits in and might play a gadget role, kind of like Justin Holiday did in the playoffs. Not a lot of minutes, but 5 minutes here and there. And once you get those couple things to gel, I legitimately think they're the second best team in the West still behind the Thunder. And I do not trust the Thunder come playoff time still, because I don't know what that looks like over an extended playoff run. They have yet to do it.
Yep.
So I still think the Nuggets have a really good shot to come out of the West, but I just listed a lot more ifs than we had last year. And that's why it's a little more concerning.
Well, that's fair. And I mean, I think, another thing that we were all tied into that I know you especially had some thoughts on. So I wanted to make sure, because I haven't talked to you about it yet. We got a patented Moody Murray occurrence. Jada Jamal was out at Media Day, and I'm beyond the concept of trying to ask why or get to the root of it. Nancy drew it, but what I want to know is, do you think that fresh off of this extension that we are going to get the level of Jamal Murray that we need to win the championship, or is this going to be an ongoing conversation all year, like it has been in spurts of the last year or so?
When did Jamal Murray really start struggling, Richie? About after the All-Star break, right?
Okay, I was definitely thinking late in the season. I almost was going to say like around the start of the playoffs.
Yeah, about after the All-Star break into the playoffs, and then during the Olympics. What happened around the All-Star break? The rules changed in the NBA. It got more physical. It got a lot more physical. And to me, that's the number one thing that does not get talked about last year with the Nuggets not winning a title again, is the team they played against was the most physical team in the NBA, and that's who they lost to. It was the team that fouled more than just about anybody, and it did not matter because it was not called. The whistle was swallowed because the NBA was making a mockery of itself in the first half of the season, and Adam Silver made different points of emphasis literally 3/4 of the way through the season, changing more or less the rules of style of play.
I hadn't thought of that.
And FIBA, International Basketball, plays similar rules where it's not always going to the offensive player if it's a disputed call, which is why you see guys ram into each other and you get free throws. Well, that's not how it was played towards the second half of last year. So let defenders be a little bit more physical, which meant Jamal, who was coming off a leg injury in the first half of last year, maybe didn't have the same explosive burst. So defenders weren't as scared to maybe get to the corner and cut him off as they were before, because it would be fouls. So to me, the rules are probably going to be the same again this year. I'm concerned with where Jamal is based off the rule changes and the last time we saw him in this style of rules in international basketball. And I think he needs to get to a level of health that he has not been to since maybe midway through that title season, where he was like dropping 50 a game against Cleveland. So I'm pretty concerned with Jamal Murray long-term and short-term. And when you commit $210 million to a guy and he's sourpuss in that press conference, man, I've never talked to anyone in the world who was upset after they got $210 million.
You couldn't find a way to upset me after putting pen to paper on a contract like that. I will say
that was the first time he talked to us too. It wasn't. I know it was like 2 weeks later, but like he hadn't talked to anyone since.
Right. And so to your point there, where if you think that Jamal needs to get to a certain point of health in order to be able to withstand the battery that's going to come with a more physical style of play, how do the Nuggets go about that? Is it minutes restrictions to start the season? Does he sit for more than normal, or do we just take him out of games entirely and give him load management?
So there were 2 times the Nuggets stressed themselves last year. Malone wanted the NBA in-season tournament for some reason. Jamal got hurt in the second in-season tournament game. Then they stretched themselves thin a little bit towards the end, going for the number 1 seed in the West, which they did tie for that. They lost on tiebreaker. So, yeah, they need to be very careful early on in the season and ramp him up. And to me, this team needs to focus on Michael Porter Jr. becoming the second most important player on their roster throughout the course of the first half of the season and integrating, like I said, whoever that shooting guard is going to be and making sure the bench unit works around Russell Westbrook. I hated their offseason for the second year in a row, basically based off the fact that they added one of the worst players in basketball in my mind, Russell Westbrook. He is not a competent NBA player.
Great. I was going to ask you what you thought about Russell Westbrook in just a second.
All right, we can get in on that, man. That was horrible. What a horrible move. And this is why players shouldn't be GMs. I know Jokic wanted this move. But they were one of the worst 3-point shooting teams by attempts last year in the league. The Nuggets were. They were 3rd worst. And people that shoot that few threes are like picking towards the top in the draft. And granted, the Nuggets play a different style because of Jokic, so they're banging a little bit more in the post. But you simply cannot shoot that few of amount of threes. And Russell Westbrook is legitimately the worst high-volume 3-point shooter in the NBA's history. So you're going to try and surround him with a bunch of guys who can shoot. I like the concept for their bench unit.
Great.
But I just don't think Russell Westbrook puts enough pressure on the rim at this point in his career. And if you watch him back in his Dallas series last year in the playoffs for the Clippers, you would question a JV basketball player for some of the decisions that were being made in a game.
Yeah, he's 35 years old now. He's not 27 and triple-double.
Right.
Yeah.
And to me, there's a way in which this very much annoys his teammates as well, especially with how nervy some of those teammates are coming off the last couple of years. I'm not going to call them sensitive because I don't think that's the right way. I just think it's a completely different personality in that locker room than that's been in it. And maybe that's a good thing in a way, but to me, it's not. That they've proven a recipe that can win. And to me, it wasn't that they needed more motivation to win last year. It's simply that they ran out of energy. So I'm a little concerned with how this goes, both on a basketball standpoint and off the court. But I'm really high on Julian Strawther. I really like that. And to me, with going back to your Jamal Murray question, if they can just work him in, and to me, if they can play Dario Saric a lot for Nikola Jokic early on in the season and not be playing him 38 minutes a night, which I know is the temptation for Malone, and I get it because I sit at those games at Ball Arena and I'm like, got to put Jokic back in. You got to put Jokic back in.
The finding a way to keep your head above water in the non-Jokic minutes just feels like it has been a hallmark of his entire kind of ascension here, because when he's on the court, there's almost nothing they can't do. And when he's off the court, it feels like you are just waiting for a car wreck.
Yeah. And that's going to be the big thing. And I'm a little concerned too, because Richie, the biggest problem the Nuggets had before they acquired KCP was their defense and specifically around the rim, because guys would get from the perimeter to the hoop a lot quicker because they didn't have a guy on the perimeter like KCP. Now, I do think Christian Braun might actually be a better defender at this point in his career than KCP, but he's still a little bit bigger and not as fleet of foot. So how does this play off against a guy like Steph Curry? I don't think the Warriors are a serious threat, but the Memphis Grizzlies are. And they've got a small guard that's really twitchy too. And Richie, do you know how many times the Nuggets lost to the Golden State Warriors after acquiring KCP the year the Golden State Warriors won a championship? How many times did the Nuggets lose to the Warriors with KCP in a Denver Nuggets uniform?
1.
0. They never lost. They fixed all their issues with one move. And I'm high on CB. I think he's a really good player. And I think the offensive thing, they'll figure out how to make it work because they're one of the best offensive players of all time. They'll figure out a way to make it work. But I'm just a little concerned with specific matchups, which is what basketball's all about. And I'm a little concerned with the 3-point shooting. And I'm also just a little bit concerned with how that bench looks minus one more good player, CB, moving up to the starting lineup, who's going to have to be filled in by Julian, who I'm high on, but has not proven himself yet.
Sure. Yeah. Listen, if there's a way we can figure out how to get Shapiro courtside at every Nuggets game this season to let Christian Braun flex a little more, I'm open to exploration. There's GoFundMe. There's lots of things we can look at. Do you think there's going to be an awkward dynamic between Westbrook and Jamal? Yeah.
I think there's already one.
You think there is already one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go look at the video of Russ doing the Blue Arrow celebration the NBA posted on NBA Media Day, and it looks lighthearted and fun. That wasn't my takeaway
It's a corny celebration, so I would, if you told me he was making fun of it, I wouldn't be like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but like it seemed like Russ was doing it in a way that's like, I'm with you now.
Yeah.
But to Jamal, it kind of seemed like you're annoying me a little bit, at least in my read. And granted, Jamal was just annoyed that entire day, so it's hard to tell. But yeah, and I really do think that Malone can't fall into the temptation that is playing Westbrook in the starting lineup with the other 4 core members. I think that temptation will exist, especially on nights or, a week where CB's not hitting his shots, or, maybe CB's a little bit shaken up or whatever it might be. I think that Malone's going to have to find a way to put Julian in that spot, and he's going to have to keep Russ in its own separate unit. I honestly would rather Peyton Watson play the 2 guard next to Michael Porter Jr. and just run super big than I would see Russ in the starting lineup. I just do not think Russ in the starting lineup is going to be the answer for this team.
There was a lot of speculation. I know Zach Bye was definitely a champion of his philosophy. Like with Russell Westbrook at the current stage of his career, with his age, where he's at with his athleticism, his personality, which he's always felt like kind of an interesting player profile or player case study in that, like, from a fan base perspective and from an outward perspective outside the league, I feel like Russ is incredibly polarizing and he's very disliked, but that doesn't seem to carry over in locker rooms and stuff. It feels like
highly respected in the league.
Within the NBA and the league, he's very highly respected.
Well, and that's in contrast to another Russell that we had here recently, but very similar experience with the fan base. Who cost the Broncos a Super Bowl? Russell Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
Who was a Broncos killer most of his career? Russell Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
Then he came in here and was a complete disaster.
Mm.
Russell Westbrook was a Nuggets killer.
Yeah.
Brought down some decent Nuggets teams. Russell Westbrook had some of his best moments of his NBA career against the Nuggets, and then joined the dark side multiple times, the Lakers and Clippers, and tried to ruin us. He was a pest. He was an annoyance. No one in the Nuggets fan base liked Russell Westbrook. And now he's here trying to end his NBA career with the title, and we'll see how it goes. But I mean, you got to remember this guy's history and this guy's past. And by the way, talk about a team that needs a little more defense without KCP. Russell Westbrook doesn't play defense. No. He's quick and he's a pest, but doesn't really play defense. And he's only 6 feet tall. He's not like this huge, I mean, maybe he's like 6'2", but he's not like this brooding force. If he's in on defense, he's your shortest guy on the floor. Jamal Murray then has to slide up. Jamal's no longer your smallest guy. And we saw last year in the playoffs, Jamal got targeted on defense. But I do think, Richie, and I know we're about to wrap up, but the most important thing that happened this postseason, this offseason for the Nuggets, is that Karl Anthony Towns got traded out of the West. Because that's the team that should have beaten the Nuggets, if anything. Yep.
Yeah. We'll see how you handle that fan base and that media. You mentioned playing good defense on the way out. I want to make sure that we hit it. That's basically the only thing the Broncos are doing really well right now, is playing great, exceptional level defense.
Hey, and the Buffs are doing the same thing.
You know what? Good point. On the Broncos, they're riding a 3-game win streak, heading into what I deem to be a winnable game against the Chargers, if not an easy game. And then a Thursday night football game coming up after that with a backup quarterback likely for the Saints. How much are you buying the Broncos after this 3-game win streak?
I still don't think they're that good, personally.
It's fair.
Yeah. I don't trust their offense at all. I think Sean's done a really good job coaching this team, and Vance deserves a lot of applause. Pat Surtain, by the way, proving that he's worth every dollar of that contract almost right away.
Yep.
Because I had some questions about that, just because he didn't make enough plays on defense. He's a shutdown corner, but sometimes he didn't make enough plays.
And I think the unsung hero in all of that is Riley Moss.
Yeah.
Because when you have a shutdown corner, whether it's Sauce Gardner, Patrick Surtain, Darrelle Revis, Champ Bailey, however far back you want to go, you can just look the other way. And if you have nothing over there to put any kind of barrier up, it mitigates the effectiveness of the shutdown corner. But Riley Moss, as of now, and as James Palmer rightfully pointed out to me before, don't sleep on Jaquan McMillan, who's putting in work in the slot.
The other guy I'd mentioned in their secondary is Brandon Jones. And if Brandon Jones is shading that way, Brandon Jones has been awesome. Brandon Jones is shading that way over Riley Moss. I would have never thrown Surtain's way before, but now I've got those two things to consider.
I think that the secondary, as it's currently constructed, to your point, is allowing us to see just how effective Pat Surtain can be, because teams are forced to go that way. Right. And it allows them the flexibility to shadow Pat on certain things.
But could I see this team, winning against the Chargers this week, beating the Saints with what's going to be a backup quarterback,
5-2,
and then having 10 days to play for the to prepare for the Carolina Panthers, who are terrible.
Yep.
This team could very easily be 6-2. And granted, nothing's easy in the NFL, but I could see them easily being 6-2. But I could also, Richie, see the Chargers winning this weekend and separating themselves as the second best team in the AFC West, because they almost went to Kansas City and beat them a couple weeks ago. And they've had a week to prepare for the Denver Broncos. And I'm super high on Harbaugh, and it takes some time to install a system, as we saw with Vance Joseph last year and how that took almost a year to carry over.
Yeah.
So Harbaugh's team is only going to get better throughout the course of the year once they get more comfortable with him. And to me, I mean, I know your guy went to college in Michigan.
Yeah. You brought up when we were out there, you brought up that Kalen Clark has followed your teams the whole year and just beaten them everywhere you've gone and all that stuff. I can't stand Jim Harbaugh. I can't stand him. Although Midnight Mel Tucker had a couple of wins against him, and my school from the time that I was there to now has had relatively good success, but I just can't stand him. So, but I will say, I think that for a team that has kind of a dearth of playmakers as they jettisoned a lot of guys and all of that, if there was going to be a coach that was going to be able to make chicken salad out of, whatever,
chicken scraps,
Jim Harbaugh in LA presents the opportunity to do that.
No doubt. And J.K. Dobbins is one of my favorite running backs in the league. He hasn't really had an opportunity to be J.K. Dobbins.
Just got to stay healthy
so many times. Gus Edwards is solid back. I think Ladd McConkey's solid. Josh Palmer's been hurt so far. They've got options. And I think Justin Herbert is a great quarterback.
So do I.
So, they've got things in place. Their team is not as talented as they've been in the past, but I still think they might be a little more talented than the Denver Broncos.
It's entirely fair, especially because on the offensive, on the defense, which is playing great, they're playing great with kind of a ragtag pirate crew of guys that, nationally people are learning their names for the first time. And on offense, they don't have, necessarily a bunker worth of playmakers either, and so I'm not ready to buy it yet, but I will say I do think that I feel like Bo has improved in certain areas every game, as bad as that Jets game was, and a lot of that had to do with weather and all that. I feel like things are just clicking a little bit more each week, and if they can just do that, factoring in the high level of defensive play, I think they have a shot to exceed their expectations, whether they, make any late season noise or not. I think they have a chance to definitely beat the 5.5 win total that was given to them before the season.
All last year, I would have told you 2024, the Broncos aren't going to make the playoffs. The way they handled this offseason and the way they cut guys, I would tell you the Broncos weren't going to make the playoffs. The way they decided to go young in the draft and kind of start the rebuild or reconstruction, or however we want to phrase it a little bit, I would have told you they're going to have to take some time. The way the cap hits went, it's going to take some time. They're not going to make the playoffs. After last week's win was the first time I said, you know what, they might actually make the playoffs this year.
Yeah.
So I'm still not believing, but
it's possible.
It's possible now.
Yeah. I would be remiss. We're a little over time, but I would be remiss on the way out because I'm not going to get to talk to you in this setting until then. Nobody's as plugged in to the Colorado Buffaloes as you. Give me the elevator pitch on why the Buffs are going to beat K-State this weekend.
Colorado hasn't allowed a performance of 100 yards this season from a receiver or a running back, which has been really impressive from their defense. This week, they've got a really good freshman, Kansas State does, at quarterback, and Avery Johnson, one of the better prospects in the country. But they're really relying on the run. And they've got Johnson, they've got a good back, and they've also got former Buff Dylan Edwards in that backfield. If they can hold all three combined, each under 100 yards, they're going to win that game. And they've done that this season. It's in Boulder, 8:15 at night. Kansas State lost in Provo in the middle of the night. So Taco Bell shout out. So I think that both of these teams have proven the recipe in which one loses and which one wins. And to me, the things can kind of line up where the Buffs pull an upset on a really talented Kansas State team.
Is that defense against the run and holding those K-State players under 100 yards, is that going to have to come in conjunction with some of the things we saw last week in terms of a renewed commitment to the run game and some success in doing that offensively?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that was huge in UCF again for the Buffaloes is they really ran the ball. And the thing that does not get talked about with Shedeur Sanders enough is he doesn't turn over the ball. And the only time the Buffs have lost this season was a game where he had just an atrocious turnover against Nebraska. So as long as the Buffs can carry the ball and not throw it away and give away pick sixes, their defense is doing enough to keep them in games to where Travis Hunter is going to make 1 or 2 plays on offense, and you're probably going to have a chance to win, if not win. So I always worry about coaching and in-game management with this team because they seem to make some of the most bizarre decisions, but that's college athletics in general, as proved by last weekend.
Better in-game managers so far in their tenure in Colorado. Coach Prime, Sean Payton, because I think we've both had some questionable.
It's Sean.
I agree.
I mean,
but it's not a proud. It's not like a.
But we're talking about one of the best coaches in the history of the NFL versus, I mean,
one of the best players at his position.
He's coached a couple years.
Yeah. Well, geez, there's so much going on, and I'm here for it. As you
just wait till we get a WNBA team.
Yes, as you point, I mean, I would be into it.
I'm in.
I would be into it. As you pointed out before we started the show, the sports equinox is upon us.
I think it's a week from Saturday.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there's so much going on. We can't wait to watch it all, and we'll break it all down here. So until I talk to you next, Jake, have a great rest of your day, and to all of you out there, we'll see you tomorrow.